So there's been a lot of news lately about the eviction moratorium being extended from June 30th of this year to the end of this month, which is July. So for some folks who were facing eviction, this is good news in that they're given another 30 days. But what's going to happen afterwards? We know here in Georgia, there's a lot of confusion about the eviction moratorium, what's going to be due after, and how to deal with eviction if this is an issue that you may be facing. So watch our next video, and we've got some updated information about the eviction process and bankruptcy, and whether or not bankruptcy is really the best way to deal with it, or if you have other options. So I've been getting a lot of calls, it seems like this week specifically, from people that are now starting to face eviction. Now, I will tell you, some landlords jumped the gun and they have already started the eviction proceedings against folks, and I'm guessing this was done before they knew about the moratorium. So if you are facing an eviction, it is still a valid procedure, but you have some ways you can deal with it. One of them is there is a form, and if you actually go down to our description, I've got a link to this form, but it's a CDC form which basically you would need to fill out. You'd need to give a copy to your landlord, and if you've already had an eviction filed against you, you need to answer that. Don't just assume, oh well, they're going to give me until the end of July. No, do not do that. You still, if you've been served already with a notice of eviction for non-payment of rent, you need to fill out this form, and then you need to give a copy to your landlord, and then you also need to, when you're answering that eviction notice, you need to include a copy of that. Now keep in mind, this is only going to pertain to situations where your eviction is for non-payment of rent. So if your landlord's trying to evict you for another reason, like you've damaged the property, they can allege that there's been drug use or something like that, some criminal activity, then this isn't going to apply. So this is just for folks that they're being evicted for non-payment of rent. Now, let's talk about if you have not been paying your rent and you know this is your last month. I'm getting a lot of calls with folks that they want to immediately file a bankruptcy because they think that that is going to allow them to stay in the property. Now, sometimes it will, but the first question that we need to ask is when we're meeting with someone that has an eviction issue is, how long do you have on your lease? Now, the reason this is important is when you file bankruptcy, yes, you can stop the eviction and you can stay in your property, but you can only stay in your property up until the amount of time that your lease is left. So bankruptcy court can't force a landlord to extend your lease, to renew your lease. That's not how it works. The only thing bankruptcy court can force a landlord to do is not evict you and allow you time to get those payments caught up if you're wanting to stay in the property. So again, the first question we got to look at when we're meeting with clients about whether or not bankruptcy is going to help with an eviction is, how long is left on the lease? So make sure that make sure you have a copy of your lease and you know exactly when that ends, because if a landlord's had to go through all this trouble to get you out, pretty sure they're not going to renew your lease. So make sure you check that. I recently just did a consult with a lady, and she had just signed her lease. It was a 12-month lease, and she, in the second month of her lease, she got laid off because of COVID. So she's a really good example of someone that she ended up filing a 13 because she has other bills or whatnot, but she filed a 13 so that we could at least take the amount she had fallen behind on and restructure that, and she can stay for the remainder of her lease, which of course is several months. She's got 9 months left in her lease, so for her it made sense to do a bankruptcy, a chapter 13 in this case. So everything is really case dependent, so there's not a one size fits all with bankruptcy and eviction. So make sure you've got this information and make sure the attorney you're meeting with is asking the right questions, because you don't want to get caught off guard. The second thing we need to know when we're looking at a case is, do you have the money to get caught up on your rent? And that's a pretty straightforward question. So if you do, if you get an eviction notice, but let's say you went back to work, you've got some stimulus money. If you've got the money to get caught up on your rent, then you can pay that amount and you can stop the eviction. I think that's pretty straightforward, but you need to, look at your, resources and see if you've got the money to catch it up. I will say some landlords I've seen are actually working with folks. So if this eviction moratorium is coming up at the end of the month, you may want to be proactive. Reach out to your landlord. See if you can work something out to get caught up. So don't just wait for them to evict you. Hopefully you've been having a conversation with your landlord, so you may be able to even prevent having to file bankruptcy if you've been speaking with them and you've got some money to work out a repayment plan. Okay, but let's talk about you don't have the money, right? You don't have the money to get caught up. You may have been in your property for 12, 14 months at this point and not been paying rent. So when the moratorium ends, that debt doesn't go away. You still owe that money. So even if you're going to leave, you may have already found a new place, you're fine. When they evict you, you're still going to owe the entire amount. And I know on the news, I've seen and online, there's some local programs for landlords or state programs where they can apply to be reimbursed for this rent that's not being paid. I'm here to tell you most of those programs have been an utter failure. The money is not getting to landlords to pay the rent that you've not been paying. So I would say the majority of landlords, even if you leave before or after the eviction, even if you leave, you're still going to get sued for the amount on that lease. And they're entitled to it. So this moratorium hasn't been excusing your rent, it's just been kicking the can down the road. So you need to understand that. So let's talk about bankruptcy and how bankruptcy can help folks who are facing an eviction, and just some things to kind of know so that if this is something that you're facing, you can set up a plan for how to deal with it, because it's very, very important to understand the process. So if you know that you are not going to be able to afford to stay in your property, and that you're going to owe all of this back rent, it may be a good time to maybe look at a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Because a Chapter 7 bankruptcy is a really quick process in regards to a court procedure. It lasts about 4 to 5 months. And actually, if you take a look on our description below, I'll have a link to a couple of our videos that explain Chapter 7 in more detail. But just kind of an overview is, it's a liquidation. So it will get rid of most all your debt, and it'll allow you to get a fresh start and pretty quickly. So if you owe arrears on your mortgage, on your rent, then we can put that in there. So let's say you haven't paid any rent and you owe $24,000 because it can pack up pretty fast or add up pretty fast. If that's the case, we can file a Chapter 7 and at least we can get rid of all of that. And then if you have other debt, if you have credit cards, medical bills, anything like that, collections, we can put all of that in the Chapter 7 and just get rid of the debt. So Chapter 7 may be very useful. Now, Chapter 7 will stop an eviction, but it's only going to stop that eviction momentarily. Because remember, this is not a consolidation plan like a Chapter 13. I'll talk about that in a minute. Chapter 7 isn't going to help you with that. So if you file a Chapter 7, yes, it will stop the eviction, but it's probably only going to stop it for a couple of months, because most likely your landlord is going to file for a motion for relief to be able to proceed against you so they can get you out, because they want to get you out fast, because they want to be able to release that program, because America's coming back online, right? So there's actually a rental shortage, so there's going to be people lined up to take those spaces. So landlords are probably going to be pretty aggressive when they're trying to get people out. So yes, Chapter 7 will temporarily stop the eviction, but I tell clients in 30 to 60 days, you're going to have to find a new place. And why is this important to understand this? Because some clients think, okay, I'm going to wait until the very last minute, file Chapter 7, that's going to buy me, another couple of months in the property, and then I'm going to leave and I'll get a new place. But here's the catch. A lot of apartment companies, leasing companies, will not let you lease if you are in a bankruptcy. So even though there's really no legal reason why they would do that, because this would be post-petition debt, which is, you couldn't put this in your bankruptcy anyway, it's still a policy that we see, and it's very, very difficult for someone that is in a bankruptcy case to lease an apartment or lease a property until they get their discharge. So I just want to make you aware of that, because you don't want to have a situation where you're in the middle of a bankruptcy and you still have, a couple of months left. You're getting evicted legally, you have to leave, but you can't even find another place to sign a lease with because they have their rules. Now, some folks may have already made a plan. I'm going to just move in with a friend or family members, and that's not an issue. But if that's not you, you need to make sure before you file the bankruptcy that you've already secured another place to live. Because I'm telling you, if you're planning on filing at the last minute, seeing how long for some folks it is a game, seeing how long you can just stay in that property until you have to get out the last minute, you may be stuck if you're then your case hasn't been discharged yet and you're trying to get a new apartment or home. So just FYI, know this before you're filing a bankruptcy to get rid of your lease arrears and staying in a property. But yes, Chapter 7 will temporarily stop an eviction. So we talked about Chapter 7. Let's talk about Chapter 13. There's a lot of reasons people file Chapter 13 as opposed to 7. And again, I have a video down in my description that talks about the difference and why some people may want to choose one over the other. I would definitely tell you to check out those videos because they're a lot more detailed, but let me give you an overview. Chapter 13 will stop the eviction. It'll let us take the amount that you got behind on your rent, and then we can restructure it in your bankruptcy. But again, you also have to keep in mind that your landlord cannot be forced, even in Chapter 13, to renew your lease. So it'll also be a timing issue because you'll be in your Chapter 13 and you're going to need to get another place to live. I will tell you, in my experience with the Chapter 13s, I've been able to write a letter for my clients in regards to, hey, this isn't a debt that we can add into the bankruptcy case. There's nothing that legally is preventing them from leasing. And some leasing companies will take that, but they won't all. And I can't tell you what an individual company is going to do. So you need to keep that in mind as well. But a Chapter 13, yes, will stop the eviction, allow us to take the amount that is past due, and you can stay in the property if you then start paying your normal monthly rent, and then we can just work out the arrears in a bankruptcy plan. So that is another option. I would really, really encourage you, if you have not been paying rent and you are looking at possibly being evicted, make sure, like I said, check out the links in our description below. We have a great resource on our website that just goes over the eviction process in Georgia, so that if you are going to get, if you're getting served with an eviction, the process, the timing, what you need to do. Whatever you do, do not ignore a dispossessory notice, because if you get a dispossessory notice and you are not responding to it, you are going to be one of those people that is going to have their items put out on the street. So, the court gives folks lots of notice, but I'm telling you, do not stick your head in the sand and don't make assumptions that, the moratorium's extended, so I'm fine. You need to make sure you're paying attention to any notices that you're getting and that you're making a plan for what to do with this past due rent once this moratorium ends, because I'm telling you, there's going to be a wave of evictions. And we knew it was coming, but I'm still seeing folks that are they're sticking their head in the sand and they're not doing anything. And you don't want to wait until the last minute. If you have a question about anything related to bankruptcy, how bankruptcy can help with an eviction process, or to even deal with the debt that you're going to be left with after an eviction process, please don't hesitate to reach out. My information is below, and I'm always happy to answer questions.